Welcome students to BGP 001, the course which is Introduction to Peace and Conflict Management, and today we will be discussing the block number 3, which is on conflict management. So in the block number 3, that is conflict management of BGP 001 course, we have 4 units under this. The unit number 9, which deals about different methods of conflict resolution. Then unit number 10 looks into what kind of role the government plays in conflict resolution. After that, unit 11, which deals with role of civil society and media in conflict resolution. And finally, unit number 12, which is about role of international and transnational organizations in conflict resolution. So in all, we have 4 units, unit number 9, 10, 11 and 12 in block 3 that we are going to discuss. So unit number 9, that is methods of conflict resolution. The objective of this unit means what you are going to understand in this unit. So in this unit, you are going to understand or learn about the types and nature of conflicts, how to distinguish between various kind of conflict, then conflict resolution and how it can be separated or distinguished with conflict management, means what is the difference between conflict resolution and conflict management. After that, you will understand what is conflict settlement and conflict resolution. Then there are different changing nature of conflict and there are different methods of conflict resolution. So with the changing nature of conflicts, how there are different methods to deal with the conflicts towards conflict resolution, that you are going to understand, and that will be covered in this unit number 9. So what is conflict management? If someone asks you, what do you understand about the conflict management? So conflict management is essentially to a specific kind of work, for example, engaging in mediation by those who have the expertise in handling them in a way that eventually results in disappearance of the conflict. So just try to understand about the conflict management. There is an existence of any kind of situation which requires mediation of some expertise or some expert person for engaging in any kind of discussion or dialogue that finally results into disappearance of the conflict. So in conflict management, existence of a conflict, dealing with the conflict by an expert person, and result of that, the disappearance of the conflict. This entire ecosystem comes into conflict management. So after conflict management, let us look into conflict transformation. What is conflict transformation? Conflict transformation is nothing but as an approach which can apply to all the stages of conflict. We have gone through all stages of conflict in the previous block, and it encompasses relatively all those constructive ways for conducting and transforming the conflict. Means conducting and transforming conflicts from harmful conflict to less harmful conflict or productive one, which can maintain secure and equitable relations amongst the conflict parties. So what is conflict transformation? Conflict transformation can happen to any of the stages of the conflict. Means it is a kind of approach which can deal with any stages of the conflict, and it deals with encompasses all those constructive ways or means for conducting and transforming the conflicts from harmful conflict stage to less harmful or productive stage, which can maintain secure and equitable relations amongst the conflicting parties. Another significant feature of conflict transformation is it can serve as a strategy of conflict management, as managers of conflict may find it judicious to often encourage intra-group conflict as a counterweight to intergroup of the conflict. Means it can serve as a strategic tool of conflict management. Conflict transformation can act as a strategy to conflict management because managers dealing with the conflict may find it a right mixture to often encourage intra-group conflict as a counterweight to intergroup conflict. Okay. After that, conflict, understanding about conflict management, then conflict transformation, we come to conflict settlement. So what is conflict settlement? Conflict settlement can be considered as different ways of setting or ending conflicts that entail joint efforts to mutually acceptable agreement by the parties between the conflicting parties, and more importantly, without the mediation of others. Just try to understand again. Conflict settlement is considered as different ways of settling or ending the conflict because of the joint efforts to reach mutually acceptable agreement between the conflicting parties, but without the mediation of the others. Unlike in third party intervention, the duty of settling conflict completely depends upon the parties involved in the conflict, as much as outside intervention is considered as unwelcome. So in conflict settlement, the main point of understanding is that third party intervention is not welcoming. It is not welcomed in conflict settlement. Rather, it is the joint effort of the conflicting parties which engage in dialogue on any kind of mutually acceptable agreement so that their conflict can be ended without the intervention of the outside parties or third party intervention. This is the basic difference between conflict transformation and conflict settlement. So after conflict settlement, the next one is the concept for our understanding is conflict resolution. What is conflict resolution? Conflict resolution is an act of settling and ending conflicts. How? By addressing the issues that trigger them, means the major region of the conflict, and in ways that are not only considered as mutually acceptable to the conflicting parties, but also establish such universal values as rights, justice, or democracy. I'll explain in all more simple word. It is conflict resolution is act of settling or ending the conflict. It is an act or procedure of settling or ending the conflict. How? By addressing the issues, all those issues which are involved in conflicts, and you trigger them in such a manner that it is not only considered as mutually acceptable to the conflicting parties, means it will be acceptable to the conflicting parties, as well as it will help in establishing universal values as rights, justice, and democracy. Both the solution which are sought in this resolution of the conflict are the means through which they are sought are judged against the criteria of being against violence, dominance, oppression, exploitation, or for the satisfaction of human needs, for security, identity, self-determination, and top of that, quality of life for all the people. So these two things you need to understand when you are having any kind of concept denomination about conflict resolution. So how conflict resolution can be distinguished from conflict management and conflict settlement? Means, what is the difference between conflict resolution and conflict management, and what is the difference between conflict resolution and conflict settlement? So under conflict management, the objective is not on completely solving the issues or reasons or the points that are underlying the conflict. Rather, it is basically in believing and accepting the term of ending the conflict as suggested by the conflict managers or third party or any person who is giving you suggestion for overcoming and ending the conflict. So conflict management is again solving issues. It is not concentrated on solving the issues underlying the conflict. Rather, it is in believing and accepting the terms of ending the conflict which has been suggested by the conflict managers. The practice of conflict management is directed towards utilizing the knowledge of psychological processes in order to maximize the positive potential which is inherent in a conflict and to prevent its destructive consequences. Again, conflict management is directed towards utilizing the expertise or knowledge of psychological processes to maximize the positive potential which is inherent in a conflict and overcome or prevent its destructive consequences. These two are the main points of conflict. And the third is the method of conflict management are therefore different from those of conflict resolution. Means the methods and the measures and the practices that are used in conflict management are different in comparison to conflict resolution. Conflict management depends upon different techniques which are necessary for influencing the minds of the conflicting parties. That is why all those such instruments like talks, like negotiations, like observance of diplomatic rituals, which have larger implication on conflict management. Influencing the minds of conflicting parties can also occur without necessarily solving the outstanding issues that set the conflict in motion. One can influence the mind of the conflicting parties, but it does not necessarily prove that all the outstanding issues involved in the conflict are resolved. Now the next question can come to your mind is how conflict resolution is distinguished from conflict settlement. Those two parties which can mutually settle a conflict, set them apart in such a manner that will be beneficial not only to detriment of the society at large and does not help restore the universal values that human societies have been cherishing for ages. Peace achieved through management or even mutual settlement may in fact be a stumbling block to the establishment of the principles of rights, justice and democracies. So after this, let us look at the changing nature of the conflict. We have seen at the time of the end of the Cold War, about half of the internal war was fought for the control of the state, ended in negotiated settlement and some measures of power sharing with the existing regimes, while in others regime were won. So a third of the wars of the separation ended in agreements that recognize regional autonomy, and another third were defeated and the rest were stalemated. So these were the changing nature of the conflict that we have seen in past many years. There has been a growing trend towards increasing democratization that is partly induced and by the fatigue effect of authoritarian regime such as existing particularly during the Cold War, where for the example Egypt, Tunisia and Libya, etc. So what are the different methods of conflict resolutions? The UN peacekeeping is a necessary element for intra-state conflict resolution process. UN peacekeeping force is one of the main element for intra-state conflict resolution process. It is a necessary element for intra-state conflict resolution, as well as in which state can act as an agent of conflict resolution, which can continues to play a significant role. And you can take an example that variety of different approaches has been tried by South Asian governments for countering the terrorism, which is also can be taken as one of the ways of resolution for the conflict. Perspective of conflict resolution. There can be two different perspectives of conflict resolution. The first is redistributive and second is integrative. So what is redistributive perspective? Under redistributive perspective, the main aim is for transfer of resources over which conflict takes place in a way that satisfies both the conflicting parties, maybe to a varying degree. What is the objective? Redistributive means distribution of resources. So under redistributive perspective, when the conflict is arising, to overcome and going for the resolution of the conflict when it has to take place, so it is in the manner that satisfies by both the conflicting parties by transferring the resources. So this satisfaction can be of varying degree, but satisfaction may be on a temporary note. The same conflict may again relapse, again occur after a while on the same issue, or may even lead to some other types of conflict between the same conflicting parties. So satisfaction in this process of redistributive perspective of conflict resolution is temporary, and it cannot guarantee that conflict will not again arise. So satisfaction has to be issue based, and which is very short lived in distributive perspective of conflict resolution. So as we have seen, in redistributive perspective of conflict resolution, the objective is transfer of resources. Maybe one party may be having larger share of the resources due to transfer, other party may be having less quantity of transferring of resources. So conflicting parties may be satisfied with the varying degree of transfer of the resources. And secondly, satisfaction is not guaranteed in this perspective of conflict resolution because it could be temporary in nature. So same conflict may again reappear sometime because of the same issue for which the conflict was already existing, and this kind of reappearance of the conflict may lead to some more intense nature of conflict in coming years between the same conflicting parties. It may be possible that other conflict parties may also add into. So satisfaction therefore is issue based and short lived. That is the basic disadvantage of redistributive perspective. Now second perspective of conflict resolution is integrative. As the name suggests, towards integration. The conflict in this perspective is resolved so in such a manner that it becomes possible for conflicting parties to live together within the same society on the basis of form of agreement on a given body of social values. Integration perspective is basically based on values and likely to have a durable impact on the society, which can help in reducing the conflicting potential of the society. The agreement on the value that violence in itself is bad under all circumstances in what encourages them to resolve conflict between them in non-violent ways. So in integrative perspective of the conflict, what happens that it becomes possible for conflicting parties to live together within the same society on the basis of some form of agreement on a given body of social values. So on the body of social values, a kind of agreement can be agreed upon between the conflicting parties between them, even though conflict is available, but they can stay in the same society on the basis of some social values. Another aspect of this integrative perspective is integration is based on values. This integration between the conflicting parties is based on values which are likely to have a durable impact on the society and which can help in reducing the conflictual potential of the society. So based on values, social tradition, social cultural values, they can have a very drastic and positive impact towards overcoming the conflict between the conflicting parties. So agreement on the core value that violence in itself is bad under all circumstances and what encourages them to resolve the conflict between them is in non-violent ways. There is no single rule which can suggest to mediators or conflict resolution professional that how a society otherwise ridden by conflicts might have moved towards value integration. What is value integration? Value integration is a historical process and attempts at promoting and inculcating values of their choice by their patriarchs or emperors or nation states, had not only become unsuccessful but often counterproductive. So these were the integrative perspective of conflict resolution. Now we can have different methods of conflict resolution under a redistributive perspective. We have gone through two different perspectives of conflict resolution. The first one was redistributive, in which conflict resolution was temporary satisfaction was not guaranteed and it was temporary in nature. And secondly, we had seen the integrative perspective of the conflict resolution, in which based on the core values of the society, the conflicting parties were together staying, which was based upon to just overcoming the conflict but still stay in the society. So how to overcome this conflict through different conflict resolution methods under redistributive perspective, that we are going to discuss. So first method under redistributive perspective, as we know, it is about transfer of resources. So the first method is win-lose method. As the name appears, someone will win and someone will lose. The nature of resources is such that they are indivisible and cannot be distributed amongst the conflicting parties under this method. So method in such case is that to force either of them either to surrender most of the things, and sometimes it is done through socially acceptable mechanisms such as majority vote, the authority of a leader, or the determination of a judge. Sometimes it involves a kind of a threat also, that if you don't follow then you will lose it. After win-lose method, we have another lose-lose method, means both the conflicting parties are on the at the loss stage. So what happens is that where both of the conflicting parties take the negative satisfaction that other could not get away with the complete resources. Neither side is aware that by confronting the conflict fully and cooperatively, they might have created a more satisfying solution, or the parties may realistically use this approach to divide their limited resources. So the first method that we have discussed was win-lose method, and second was lose-lose method. Now the third comes win-win situation. Win-win method means winning situation for both the conflicting parties. So it is a conscious and systematic attempt at maximizing the goals for both the conflicting parties through collaborative problem solving. The conflict in this case is seen as a problem to be solved rather than a war to be won. Means collaborative approach is used for solving the problem, and the objective is to solve the problem, not like any kind of war is happening and we are going to overcome the war. And the parties, those who are involved, means conflicting parties, they work towards the common goal. And what is that common goal? That can be attained by both the parties by pulling together, means collaborating. So win-win method, the core theme behind the win-win method is collaboration. What is collaboration? Collaborative efforts towards solving the problem by maximizing the benefits for both the conflicting parties. And conflict is basically seen as a problem, not a kind of war is happening between the two conflicting parties. So this method recognizes that conflict is nothing but a problem, and this problem can be solved through collaborative problem solving approach, and conflicting parties are encouraged or motivated to work towards their respective common goals. What is the common goal? That which can be attained by both the parties when they are jointly and collaborating with each other. So conflict can be avoided by pulling both the parties to join together towards collaborative approach for solving the problem. So with this we have covered unit number 9, and in that let us go back from here. We discussed different methods of conflict resolution under redistributive perspective. So there were 3 methods: win-lose method, lose-lose method, and win-win method. And the best part of the win-win method that we just covered was towards in which a conflict is basically seen as a problem is existing which needs to be solved. How it can be solved? By pulling both the conflicting parties to join together and make a collaborative efforts to solve the problem. So in the redistributive methods, we had conflict resolution. We have 3 methods: win-lose method, lose-lose method, and win-win method. Then we had gone through integrative and redistributive perspective of conflict resolution. In the integrative perspective, we have seen that conflicting parties live together within the same society on the basis of some form of agreement on a given body of social values. Where in the redistributive perspective, it was more towards transfer of resources, distribution of resources, for which it was not necessary that each of the conflicting parties will be completely satisfied, and it was also not guaranteed that the conflict will be over. Not guaranteed. Conflict may again reappear, again reoccur, and satisfaction is temporary. These are the critical points of redistributive perspective of conflict resolution. And one of the conflict resolution methods in which we have just discussed is that the one and the major contribution is about UN peacekeeping force. UN peacekeeping force are basically involved for intra-state conflict resolution processes, which undertakes under the overall mandate of United Nations. Then we had also gone through different changing nature of the conflicts post-Cold War scenario that happened in the world, especially after disintegration of United Socialist Republic of Russia, USSR. After this disintegration of USSR, the concept of Cold War was over. So after that, the nature of conflict has also been changed. With this, we are also discussed in this particular unit about conflict resolution, conflict management, conflict settlement, and how we can differentiate, how we can distinguish between conflict management, conflict settlement, and conflict resolution. Conflict management, as we have discussed, that it is not at the solving issues underlying the conflict, rather it is into believing in and accepting the terms for ending the conflict by the conflict managers. And in the conflict management, third party intervention is primary. Okay, after that, conflict resolution. In the conflict resolution is settling and ending the conflict by addressing the issues that can trigger them in a ways that not only considered as mutually acceptable to the conflicting parties, but also establish universal values such as rights, justice, democracy, etc. Conflict settlement, different ways of settling or ending the conflict that entail joint effort to reach mutually acceptable agreements between the conflicting parties, and most importantly, without the mediation of others. We have seen in conflict management, mediation of third party is necessary, whereas in the conflict settlement, it is without the mediation of the third parties. And unlike in third party intervention, the duty of settling conflict rests with the parties itself without the outside intervention. And in conflict settlement process, generally outside intervention is considered as unwelcome. Conflict transformation is another approach which can apply to any of the stage, means all the stages of conflict, and what it encompasses: relatively constructive ways of conducting and transforming conflict from harmful conflict stage to less conflict stage, or a productive one stage. This conflict transformation can also serve as a strategy of conflict management, and managers of conflict may find it a right judicious mix to often encourage intra-group conflict as a counterweight to intergroup conflict. Conflict management, we have already discussed that what is conflict management, that it refers essentially to a specific kind of work which engaged with the mediation of those who have expertise in handling them in such a manner that it eventually results into disappearance of the conflict. So in conflict management, three things. First, the effort is for disappearance of the conflict. Then we need to have an outside expert for which have the capability to dealing with and engaging with mediation of the outside person with the conflicting parties. So in this unit 9, these were the points that we have concentrated for your enhanced understanding about different methods of conflict resolution. So with this, we end the unit and we meet again in unit number 10. Unit number 10 will be role of government in conflict management and its resolution. Till then, bye.